Welcome to the next generation of warfare, psychological warfare. In modern conflict, the mind is a potent weapon. Discover General Michael T. Flynn's groundbreaking guide, The Citizen's Guide to Fifth Generation Warfare. Unlock tactics, strategies, and the mindset to navigate this cognitive battlefield that we all find ourselves in. Equip yourself against manipulation and emerge unscathed. Unleash your potential. Order now.
Are you guys ready? I know you are. That's right. Operation GLADIO, part 12, chapter 12, 12th part of the series. Where are we going today? Let's say Chicago to Turkey. Chicago, Obama's old stomping grounds. You guys, this has been absolutely awesome. We'll catch up on some things at the very end. But before we do this, and I bring on the Colonel, Alpha's got to keep the lights on. You guys have been very gracious. For those of you that have visited the mall at thealphawarshow.tv and have bought merchandise, I just want to say thank you, and it's appreciated. I do try to get letters to you guys. I'm just one-man team over here, so it takes a little bit. But with that, let's go to 2 quick commercials, and when I come back, we will have the Colonel for Operation GLADIO, part 12.
Welcome to the next gen.
Are you worried about the effects that higher inflation rates will have on your investments? Are you trying to secure your retirement savings against losses, but you notice that inflation is a hot topic these days? But how dangerous are low inflation rates on your retirement savings? An inflation rate of 2% may not seem like much, but it means that prices will just about quintuple over the lifetime of the average American. And 4% average inflation rate means that something that costs $1 when they're born will cost $23 when they die. That demonstrates the danger of even low inflation rates. So when it comes to gold and inflation rates, many investors want to know whether inflation rates have an effect on gold prices. What history indicates is that over the long term, increased inflation should lead to correspondingly higher gold prices. From September 1971 to August 2020, gold grew 7.5 times as much as inflation. Not only can an investment in physical gold help protect your assets against the damage done by inflation, it can also help grow the value of your retirement portfolio over the long term. If you're looking to protect your retirement assets, why wait until stock markets crash and gold begins to rise in price?
When I started MyPillow, it was just a problem solution, one product company. Well, since then, with the help of my dedicated employees, we now have hundreds of products, some you might not even know about. To get the word out, we're having a $25 extravaganza. 2-pack multi-use MyPillows, $25. MyPillow sandals, $25. And for the first time ever, our 6-pack towel sets, you guessed it, just $25. Our brand new 4-pack dish towels, $25. And I've never done this before. Premium MyPillows with all new Giza fabric, any size, any loft level, even king size for only $25. And there's so much more. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code for our $25 extravaganza. Order $75 and over. Your entire order ships absolutely free.
Absolutely free. You guys, My Pillow, my store, promo code Alpha, all those links are down in the description, including the links to follow this amazing woman that I'm bringing on the screen now, the Colonel. How are you doing, ma'am?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. For those that are like, Alpha's voice sounds a little funny today, I'm dealing with some congestion, you guys, a little bit of a throat irritation. Yes, I'm taking my hydroxychloroquine. I'm hydrating. Can't hold me down. They could just make things uncomfortable. But other than that, it's Stagecoach weekend, you know, so I see a lot of the cowboys and cowgirls around, although some of them are seasonal cowboys and cowgirls, Colonel, and I'm a cowboy year round, so there's that. But the question is, how are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. I know the Stagecoach days out there is very similar to San Antonio's rodeo that they have. That's a week-long event. Absolutely loved living in San Antonio back when it wasn't the San Antonio it is today. So yeah, those are exciting days. I remember the excitement around those types of events when I lived out in LA. Lots of fun.
I was working Stagecoach the evening. You remember when it was? Yeah, it was under Obama. Everybody is what it is. But when they're like, "We got him," when it was the hunt for Osama, and they're like, "Man," I mean, Stagecoach is just 95% of the people there are just patriots, and the other 5% are just confused. But I mean, it went crazy. I mean, I was like, what a place to be when that information, which if we look back with our GLADIO glasses, is probably a completely different story. But at the time, living under the illusion of what we thought that event was,
yep.
I mean, just the energy of patriotism, I was like, man, this country can never fall. Yeah, they can hit us, they can make our knee touch the canvas, but there's some patriots in this country. The vast majority just want to be left alone, live their lives,
correct,
raise their babies, their grandbabies. And you piss off some of these people, and well, read the history books. I won't say much more than that. But Chicago to Turkey, I mean, people be like, what?
Yeah. So today we're going to take most of the material out of the third GLADIO book that I read way back months ago. It's called GLADIO, NATO's Dagger at the Heart of Europe by Richard Cottrell. And unfortunately, because I've been working on a special project, I wasn't able to type up my notes because generally I type them up and I put them on my laptop so I can look at the camera and my notes at the same time in big letters, so I don't have to wear my glasses. So I am going to have to wear my non-GLADIO glasses that are my grandma glasses through most of this so I can read my own chicken scratch. Because oftentimes what happens is I'll write down some notes based on the material, and then I'll go back and I'll think, wow, I probably ought to look that guy up. And then I'll have like 5 notes written around his name. So it gets a little confusing, which is why I like to take the time to type them up. So I'm just giving everybody a heads up.
And what was the author's name one more time?
Richard Cottrell, Cottrell.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I had the right one up so I can bring up the cover and then everybody can see.
It's definitely a great book. The only thing that I would tell anybody that's new to this series is don't read it first. You will miss a lot of what he says if you don't have an in-depth knowledge, which is better gained by books like Paul Williams' Operation Gladio book. So you get a broader perspective of what it actually is and what was behind the creation of it. Cottrell does not go into that, and so it isn't a good first book.
Gotcha. And just to make sure this is the correct one up on the screen. Very cool. Cool cover.
Yeah, and notice that is NATO's logo. It looks very similar to the CIA's logo. Just saying. Compass rose.
Not by accident.
Not by accident. So are we ready to jump in?
Oh, we're ready. Let's rock. We're ready to go.
All right. So basically, you have to take note of the fact that these people that like to scream about democracy gloss over the fact that so much of our government is not an open government. And when you have elements of secrecy in what should be a republic, you don't have a republic, and you certainly don't have a democracy either. And Tucker's well known for saying repeatedly that we have about 8 to 10 billion pieces of paper classified in a vault underground in downtown, Suitland, Maryland. It's just outside the gates of Andrews Air Force Base. And it's like 5 or 6 football fields big of nothing but classified secret documents. Some, obviously, it could be JFK's as well, but some dating back that far. So that's not a republic nor a democracy. And
So you're telling me that the hidden film from the JFK assassination is not in the leg of a church pew out in the middle of nowhere, like the movies told me?
well, actually, that's actually a very funny story. That Magruder film that was given to the government, that was later had frames of it altered, was found in Time magazine's vault. Luce, the guy that owned, whose wife was the ambassador in Italy when we were screwing with their elections and setting up Operation Gladio. Yeah, she was the ambassador to Italy. He was Time magazine's owner. That's where that film was found. That wasn't even in Suitland, Maryland.
Jeez, I was just joking.
I'm telling you, Alpha, there's nothing about any of this history that we've been told that's real. We've been living an illusion. So, yeah, that's where they found it. So basically, secrecy is now a very fun to our government and how it operates. It is a tool that's used to control us, and it is welded by the powerful people, so that it's used almost as a barricade, if you will, to shield them from us. And you have entities that were set up along the way. And we're not going to do it because we won't have time. But if you just go back and research organizations like American Civil Liberties Union, you will find out quickly by going through their founding, who founded it, what their background is. It's all an illusion. Sure, they prosecuted a few civil liberties, but that's not why they were there. They were there to shield the important pieces of it from prosecution that got in the way of a government mission, basically implementing the New World Order. So the use of secrecy to conceal a criminal conspiracy, or as I call it, the international syndicate, famously was illustrated probably best in what we talked about already, the Iran-Contra affair and the Watergate scandal. And it's interesting because you learned in, just for those who may have missed that show, the Iran-Contra affair, that the entire thing was set up by primarily rebel forces for the good of Nicaragua, called the Sandinistas, that we were told was communist, and they weren't. And the Contras, which were the displaced CIA puppet governments and their supporters, who took refuge in places like Costa Rica, who had a U.S. installed president, and Honduras, which had a U.S. installed president. And they created GLADIO operations surrounding Nicaragua, and we paid for the entire thing. And then you have the arms and the drugs, and, you know, Iran obviously featured heavily in that discussion as well. And then you fast forward or go backwards, sorry, to Watergate, and you find the CIA knee deep in that one as well, because of course the plumbers were the plumbers from the CIA, basically instigating all of it. So you have a guy by the name of, well, let me say this. A lot of people believe that Watergate happened. There's lots of speculation, and I'm speculating here, so is the author, that Watergate happened as a cover-up for a much bigger scandal that was that had just occurred in the United States. And that happened to be the murder, the cold-blooded murder of Fred Hampton and Mark Clark. And you ask, who are they? Well, We were told a lot of things. We were told they were communists. We were told that they were bad guys. But because Fred Hampton actually was a Black Panther. Now, we've been led to believe, and I don't know, I don't have an extensive knowledge of all of their escapades, but Fred Hampton was in charge at the time. You tell me what you think of this. He created a thing called the Rainbow Coalition. It had poor Blacks, poor whites, and poor Hispanics. There's those balloons again.
I don't know where they're coming from, I swear.
And he brought them all together in Chicago to try to change their local government. And they called him all kinds of names. They called him a Marxist. They called him a communist. His message was this, that our government is a fascist terrorist organization, and that our government was the biggest threat to the survival of the country. Now, I call him Einstein, not a Marxist, but the government, who he obviously was in opposition to, staged in 1967. Well, in 1967, the FBI said he was absolutely a threat. He had to be dealt with. So they infiltrated his organization, this Rainbow Coalition, got somebody close to him in his house and drugged him. And that night, while he's laying in his bed drugged, they come in and murder him. And they shoot everybody in the house. Evidently, there were people that stayed there. There was a guy that was sitting in the front room on guard because they had been getting told that they were going to die. And the guy that was sitting in the living room had a gun because he was the security guy. And that's the guy named Mark Clark. His gun, when they shot him, his finger was on the trigger and the gun went off like in the ceiling, but he didn't actually shoot anybody. And they were all of the SWAT team was all in the room, in the house by the time that gun went off and he was killed. So there were all kinds of articles about the fact that they had come under fire when they had no reason to be there. They didn't have a search warrant. They had no probable cause other than the fact that they deemed him as a threat. And so if you think about this sounds like the Gretchen Whitmer. It sounds like so many things. It sounds like the all of the patriot organizations that were leading up to January 6th. And the reason why I think it's so important that we go back and look at our history of things like this is you find these people that have this narrative of, oh, it's a screw up, or, oh, it's a mistake. No, you've been doing it for a very long time. Now, what's interesting about this particular instance is, guess what group was formed as a direct result of this? The Weather Underground.
I'm bringing that up.
So this instance, this murder, basically gives rise to the Weather Underground and they use it as their excuse to go do further terrorist attacks. And I'm telling you right now, even though I have not looked at it, but I will, it's on the list. The Weather Underground was an Operation GLADIO styled terrorist campaign that was executed throughout the United States. I'm saying it unequivocally, just based on the little bit that I know as the precursor to why it was set up. They killed this guy, then they had these people create the Weather Underground to basically rectify or whatever, or take, you know what I'm saying? It's just a domino effect. And this happened once you read the rest of these countries, stories of how these things escalated. It's all on purpose and it's all done by the government. And that's the reason why people who don't understand how Bernadette Dorn and those guys that were in the weather underground ended up supporting Obama, that he's the Manchurian candidate. He's a product of the government, and so are they.
100% believe that he definitely is Manchurian candidate. It's interesting too because it has the rainbow with like that lightning bolt going right through it.
What's that tell you?
That they did exactly what you said they did.
Okay. So, deliberate deception of the American people and their elected representatives and the Congress of the United States. That's what all of this is about. Now, they certainly have some congressional people that have been bought off and know what's going on. And we will prove that in some upcoming domestic investigations that we're looking into. You can tell just in some of the congressional hearings about some of these things that they're on the inside. So Haynes Johnson wrote in Sleepwalking Through History, the CIA and a previously obscure Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North knitted a network known loosely as the Enterprise, composed entirely of hand-picked private brokers and off-radar to Congress. Now, I have told you guys that the Enterprise was not hand-knitted by Lieutenant Colonel North. It was hand-knitted by the CIA as an offshoot of the CIA during Carter, when he fired about 1,000 of the agents to downsize that and put an admiral in charge of it in order to change and stop doing covert operations. The Enterprise was set up. He's right in the fact that it was used extensively as a black ops entity. It was not a harebrained idea of a lieutenant colonel that happened to be in the Marines. It was an orchestrated event by the insiders inside of the CIA to set up a black ops, basically CIA within a CIA. The Enterprise blossomed to a full-scale war-straddling octopus, in the words of this author. It could be counted on for its own airline, its own shipping, and to create its own front companies to do whatever it needed to have done. It was, there were several hundred offshore bank accounts that was set up in banks like BCCI, Nugent Hand Bank in Australia, Castle Bank in the Bahamas, and BCCI, by the way, was located in Pakistan, which is a completely captured CIA country, just so that y'all know that. The whole business was up to its neck in organized crime and all the things that we know that are the tenets of Operation Gladio: human trafficking, drug trafficking, and arms trafficking. This ambitious nature would come basically included soldiers of fortunes, mercenaries, and they used shipments of NATO munitions and narcotics through this Operation Gladio CIA system to places like Bulgaria and Romania. And the reason why this is important is later on, we're going to do a deep dive into Bulgaria. Bulgaria, and still today, by the way, is the weapons trafficking hub. Just like we went into a little bit about how Taiwan was the drug trafficking of the world, the Chiang Kai-shek, as he moved around from China to Burma to Taiwan. Bulgaria, in almost every Operation Gladio scenario, even the ones in South America, a lot of the arms transited Bulgaria.
I'm going to jump in, just interrupt real quick. And I think I may have mentioned this. I know I've told you, but I think I might even said it on, maybe it was part 1 or part 2. It was early on in Operation Gladio when I had brought up a gentleman by the name of Evan Newman. He was the guy that was at January 6th that had the Ukrainian color revolution scarf, which we know is Operation Gladio. And the FBI had tabs on him, let him go at the airport. Well, when he fled the country, because the FBI let him leave, he went to Ukraine to get into Bulgaria. And Bulgaria is who's offering them political asylum
There you
right
go.
now. Like, wow.
I'm telling you, Bulgaria is another hotbed of Operation Gladio mess. And they feature in almost every extensively researched project that we've done that involved illegal arms. So, also, it's important to know that the entire Iran-Contra scheme was exposed when that supply train plane that we talked about last time was shot down in by the Sandinistas. And the Daniel Ellsberg, the State Department whistleblower who exposed the U.S. military's best kept Vietnam secrets in the Pentagon Papers, denounced the Iran-Contra as quite the worst covert operation in U.S. history. And it probably was. It was the Iran-Contra, the author believes, was a natural offshoot of the years of lead. And for those of you who don't recall that phrase, that was the name that was given to Operation Gladio in Italy because lead bullets were flying everywhere. Anytime anybody looked into Operation Gladio in Italy prior to 1990, they were murdered. A few was murdered after, but everybody was murdered before that. Reporters, judges, prosecutors, government officials, to include their prime minister. So they called that the years of lead, which rocked the European continent for more than 20 years. NATO, the Pentagon, the CIA, the Holy See, Eastern Bloc states, Bulgaria and Romania, Turkish criminal gangs, and actually it's Turkish gray wolves, and the mafia all played roles. Also, you have in some cases Mossad, the UK, Germany, and Italian intelligence all wrapped up into this ball of wax as well. And many people have heard of George Kennan. It's important to understand his role in all of this because George Kennan wrote a lot of things that set the foundation for this. He didn't come up with it, of course. He was just documenting it. But he later had a change of heart over what was going on. So let me just give you a couple of his things. He believed that people attribute his legacy to the resurgence of fascism after the destruction of Hitler. It was driven to contrive a war on terror, basically to install fascist dictators, and that I've articulated throughout South America, Europe, the East, everywhere. Kennan was a graduate of Princeton, and he was in the Moscow embassy just after World War II. So he knew firsthand that Russia was not, or Soviet Union was not the threat people were making it out to be. So he basically is engaged as part of the whole gaslighting by constantly talking about this communist threat. So most of all, he wanted someone to listen to him because he was growing up, he was an introvert. He had all kinds of crazy things happen to him in his childhood. Kennan composed in 1946, which is just prior or just after World War II, the famous Long Telegram, which was basically a series of State Department cables that outlined how he was analyzing the causes of Soviet mistrust of the West. And he basically kind of waved it all off as the Soviet Union is kind of instinctively insecure And that's really their problem, and not giving any justification for the basis of what they saw was the historical nature of our imperialism, which was all well-founded. But he articulates a line of thinking that basically goes, yeah, that's all irrelevant. And this is all just Soviets' insecurity. And they needed that as a precipice to be able to then sell this fear of communistic expansion under the containment thing that followed. So if you don't have an unstable, that's why they try to paint everybody as unstable, while they're the ones actually creating unstable people via MK Ultra. You see that? Yeah. So, oh my gosh, we've got all these unstable people, but oh my gosh, we're the ones that created them all. And that's the same thing that they did with USSR. They paint them as unstable, and then everything that they do fits into the instability frame that it's propaganda. It's pure propaganda, start and finish.
Well, two interesting things, and this is speculation. I'm throwing darts. I'm seeing where they're landing here. Is Kennan's middle name is Frost. And, as a young cop, there's always, and in the military too, you always hear this phrase, stay frosty. And where did it come from? And so people say, oh, it was Wamball's, some book from like the 70s, that's mentioned it. But this guy's before then, and just reading through him, because he later wrote an article known as the X article. I mean, that's Twitter is now X. I'm just saying, I don't know, I haven't researched it. You guys can go dive into it. But when you're just reading the little bit that I've been reading on him while you've been speaking about him, this concept of staying vigilant and alert, especially with regards to Russia, and then his middle name being Frost, it would not be such a stretch to be that stay frosty was an attribute to this man and some of the things that he was telling us to be alert and vigilant to. Just throwing darts. You guys can go research it, see where it lands.
So basically, he's the one that comes up with the communist menace that's going to spread everywhere and subvert every Western country there is. And he also, the author has a couple of sayings in here I thought was hilarious. One of which was he saw himself as a one-eyed man in the kingdom of the blind. Which is a perfect depiction of his mentality, because these guys are all narcissists too. They all think they're smarter than everybody else. He also allowed himself to imply that Stalin might be like a psycho and roaming around the Kremlin. Same thing that they were trying to do with Putin. This is kind of a standard playbook. While they're the ones that are acting irrational. So Russia's historical isolation from European trends, as far back as the Enlightenment and the Renaissance, illustrated to the West that she was very weary of all of their shenanigans, and they were looking for a way to exploit that. Also, a lot of people don't know that where Russia is concerned, that when the Bolshevik Revolution was going on, we actually intervened in the White Russian. So I don't know if you know, but during the Bolshevik Revolution, where you have the Bolshevik communists that came in and basically defeated the Tsar and murdered his entire family, there were nationalistic forces that didn't necessarily want to live under the Tsar, that was kind of embedded in this, but they were led by a general. They referred to them as White Russians, and they wanted their freedom, but they also didn't want the Bolsheviks. So after the royal family is deposed, which actually happened before the actual Bolshevik part, but anyway, as they're taking over Russia, these white Russians are fighting against them. And instead of the US coming in and supporting them, they had bought and paid for the Bolsheviks. There was no predestination that Russia was ever going to be communist at all. That was all imposed by the West. So the white Russians, we actually sabotaged their efforts to kick the Bolsheviks, who were not organic to Russia. They imported Lenin and Trotsky. They were not organic. They were hiding out in New York City and London at the time that they were pushed into at the end of the Russian Civil War. So again, it's us meddling. We installed the communistic element in Russia. It didn't have to be communistic because there were people fighting against that. Kind of like the same thing that happened in Cuba, where we played both sides against, you know, same thing. They have a very limited playbook once you start looking at things with your GLADIO glasses on.
And this whole time, and this whole time, I thought White Russian was just a drink.
It's not.
Now it's like there's a whole history behind that name.
There is, yes. So Kennan's initial error was failing to detect the fine line of distinction between the Russian nationalism and the Soviet banner that flew over it. Stalin was considered the rock of salvation to the vast majority of Russians following the Great Patriotic War, because he basically got rid of Trotsky and Lenin, or he was the successor to him. Trotsky was thrown out long before that. But so he was seen as one of them. And they're very nationalistic. Russia has always been that way. It's a cultural thing. And we completely missed it. His final solution was to seal the Russians and communism in general inside of a single entity as if it was one and the same, which it was not. The US and NATO allies did not break off diplomatic or trading relations with the Soviets or its satellites at any time. And that's important if you're going to understand how the international syndicate works. They destabilize these countries and install these dictators so they can exploit it, right? They never cut off trading with them. That's the telltale sign. If you really wanted, like China, if you really wanted to ruin China, would you be going full scale into China and giving them most favorable? It's all bullshit. Every bit of it's bullshit. It's a lie. They're scamming us. Look at what they do, not what they say. So later, he feels like, and he gets lots of criticism, that he's personally responsible for much of this government think tank garbage. And he largely recanted once he realized that placing the East-West relationships in a perpetual deep freeze was going to create even bigger problems. He began to oppose NATO and eventually recognized that wars of liberation raging in Asia were driven by the anti-colonial nationalism rather than Marxist-Leninists. So he acknowledges long before, I mean, our government basically never acknowledges it, but that all of the stuff that was going on in Vietnam, all of the stuff that went on in Korea, wars obviously that we got involved in, had nothing to do with communism. Neither did it in the Congo, neither did it in Nicaragua or any of South America. There was no real threat of communism. This was all imperialistic maneuvers to install a fascist government. So our international syndicate players worldwide, not ours in the US, could exploit all of these countries. And he finally wakes up and realizes it. So I think this one's, he brings up General John Kashvili. And I worked for General Kashvili. He was the Provide Comfort commander when I was deployed to Turkey and Iraq. He, as a former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and NATO commander, which means he managed Operation GLADIO, and a General Klaus Neumann, Germany's former top soldier and ex-chairman of NATO, said exactly that in Brussels in January 2008, where there was a brief summer war that same year between Russia and Georgia. And basically, he says the demonstration of retaliatory canonistic containment in reverse. Following the proposed NATO anti-ballistic missile system in Poland, supported by the missile detector screens in Czechoslovakia and Romania. It will be surprising if the General Kashvili-Neumann pronouncement is not read by future historians, assuming the course there are any, as the first chapter in verse in the Second Cold War. And it says, this author says this, I quoted this, Kashvili, whose parents were Georgian immigrants, was a leading protagonist, arguing that this Caspian hotspot should be allowed fast-track alliance membership into NATO, knowing full well that it's going to piss off Russia. This was an incendiary proposition in Russia's eyes, following on the extended process of enlarging NATO and the European Union. Viewed from the Kremlin's perspective, it was the encirclement policy of the old Kennan philosophy, initiated by Madeleine Albright. The Brussels statement devised as a cunning flyer to indicate the subtle shift in the first strike nuclear posture. And so basically you have, and he just uses that one illustration, there's many, of NATO. That's one of the pricks. And people talked about that, and Putin talked about it in his interview with Tucker. It was prick after prick after prick. What they did in Poland and basically bringing it in, what they did in the Balkans, what they did in Kosovo, Herzegovina, and the destruction of Yugoslavia. Every single, Hungary, Romania, every single one of those was seen as another punch in the gut to Russia. And they knew what they were doing. That's kind of the travesty, if you will. So,
well, and this is where I struggle sometimes too, Colonel, is because I know my government lies to me. I've known historically they've lied to all of us. So it's one of those things where, when you go back to, like the Cold War and, us versus them and the Cuban Missile Crisis, we've been told that, Russia's this big, bad boogeyman. Well, if my country always lies to me, then why would that be any different? So then it's the understanding of, well, if they're not the boogeyman, then what are they?
And that's a great question, because that's where I come back to China all the time, because now obviously China's kind of superseded Russia. Not that they want to get rid of Putin. I mean, that's just regime change is their goal for Russia, because they want to split Russia up at the Ural Mountains. That's the long-term goal that these people have for Russia. But the big question mark for me is China. I already know they're lying to me about the drugs, because primarily the big drug supplier is Taiwan, not China. And these people are maniacal enough to implant these chips into Taiwan to basically coerce China into doing whatever they want under the auspices that we're just going to fake an attack anyway. We'll disrupt the chip supply. That'll get everybody on our side, and we're just going to accuse you of it. That's what they do. What part of that they're doing right now, I don't know, but that is what they do. They've done it historically. We've watched, we've got documented evidence that that is their MO. And so once you understand what they do and why they're doing it, you have to look at everything differently. I don't know who the good guys and bad guys are, but I know our government is a bad guy, unequivocally. And I don't know about all of them. I do know about us.
And I think that's probably one of the most important thoughts right there, Colonel, is we don't know who the good guys and bad guys are, but we know we're patriots. We know we're Americans. We know we're good. So we just have to understand that, and I say this a lot and I repeat it because I really want people to grasp this thought process. the word patriot is not isolated to just Americans.
Correct.
There are patriots in every country, and I think those are the ones we know are good, and I think those are our true allies, not all this bull that the government keeps telling us. Because you know with China too, it's just like, well, you see what's happening with the Falun Gong, so there's bad stuff and genocide stuff happening. But then it's like, well, how much of that do we really know? And it's not to minimize anything like that, because we've heard stories from people that really have lost loved ones that we know, okay, they're telling the truth. So it's just like,
But you
is
don't know-
Russia and
you don't know who's doing it. You don't know what's behind it.
yeah, and so that's where I'm going is Russia and China dealing with this, where they have these own internal wars going on in their countries for a fight for power, because you have Operation Gladio unfolding in these countries to take down all these big giants so they can have total control.
Well, I don't believe that there's any internal issue with Putin. Russians overwhelmingly love him. Okay. And it's hard to fathom from Americans' perspective that what they label a strong man, most cultures are not American. And they don't want what we want. They're never going to have what we have. I'd argue we don't have what we think we have anyway, but they want to have someone that they can put their trust in. They want that strong leader. And that's what Putin is. Putin has overwhelming support in Russia. It is not communist. It is not a dictatorship, and they are not fascist. I don't care what anybody says. They're just not.
Let me ask you this wild question that'll probably make its way to Rachel Maddow again. But I'm just curious. Do you think, based off of the research that you've kind of been doing, and it's just speculation, but do you think that Putin actually cares about the American people enough to help expose who's running your country is not who you think it is? And I'm talking about the normies, not people like us that kind of recognize what's going on in our country. But do you think Putin would make moves in our nation, whether through information war or other means, to expose to the overall American that, listen, you are not living in a free country. This is what's really going on. And this is why I will bring your American reporter over here to give you a history lesson, that hopefully you guys keep looking into this and realize that I actually want for your people what I'm trying to keep for my people over here. Like,
well, I think you've said two different things. Do I think he's operating inside of America to do that? No. Do I think he's operating internationally to do that? Absolutely. His foreign minister going to the UN and basically exposing everything that's happening in NATO that they're doing in Ukraine is part of that. The allowing of Tucker to come over there and interviewing him and giving that history lesson. Do I think it went over some people's head? Yes. But do I think enough people took that as confirmation that we're on the right track? Absolutely. Anybody listening to that interview that knows anything about GLADIO knew exactly what he was talking about. And so I do believe he's, I honestly believe that's the reason why he engaged in Syria. He knew exactly what the U.S. was going to do. And he said, no, you're not going to do it here. I will defend Assad, whether you like it or not. He stepped up and supplied weapons to other entities, Niger. And they are signing arms deals with anybody who wants to fight back against NATO. And so I believe he is part of what is going to be a reckoning at some point. I cannot overstate the importance of his country being economically better in fighting the U.S. when the U.S. basically has declared open war against him. He has been the first financially to stand up against obviously he's already stood up militarily. He's been the first financially to tell us to go pound sand and got better as a result of it. So yes is the answer to your question. I don't have any documentation that indicates he's operating covertly in the United States, but quite frankly, I don't think he has to.
Well, and it's just because I look at all the moves he's done, like the recent one against JP Morgan Chase,
Yeah.
that's like, almost 500 is a million. It's not billion. I think it's like just short of 500 million. You see these moves and it's just like,
Yeah.
let's defund these bankers that are funding this
Right.
Operation Gladio.
Correct.
Come after them.
Correct. And countries that will allow us to stand with them, like Turkey, against the Operation Gladio network, we will stand with them.
Just fascinating.
It is. It is. So basically, you have, and I want to just reiterate the fact that this is all of the people, like the British Special Operations Executive, which was the thing before MI6, the CIA, the OSS is obviously their precursor. But you have every element of all of these different NATO countries all have organized Gladio infrastructure. And the author mentions the fact that early in the British World War II, you had these things called let's see, what were those called? The Jetbergs, GED. They called them the JEDs. That basically was their Operation Gladio entities inside of the UK. And even countries that we thought were neutral, like Sweden, had Operation Gladio extended throughout their countries. And of course, they were used for all kinds of different things, primarily domestic terror. A professor, John Duffield, says, where any collection of countries opts for an internationalized cooperative to oversee their security, inevitably such a body, quote, will reflect the calculations of self-interest of the most powerful member state, unquote, which of course is the US. And basically he goes on to say that Nixon seemed to confirm when he said this, quote, the only collective body that ever worked was NATO. And that was because it was a military alliance and we were in charge of it, unquote. In short, NATO was pursuing policy ends that chiefly met American interests to supervise the international order. Now, what I want to caveat that with is that that is true only to the extent that you discount the international syndicate symbiotic relationship, right? We may be a mouthpiece for it, but it is made up of all of the industrialists, the bankers, because at this point with the World Bank, the IMF, there's no separation between any of these entities. To say that we're the leader is very disingenuous. It's as Mike Ben says, it's the blob effect, right? So they're all in it together. And he also mentions, the author mentions that Winston Churchill's whole position and his announcement of the Iron Curtain, which started the whole containment push, happened in Missouri. And that was Harry Truman's home state. And he did it in 1947 as part of this mantra. Churchill's sole purpose was to lock the US and Europe into this alliance, which basically complements the British Empire as much, if not more, than the US. And so that's very important to keep in mind. It also is what locked in the strategy of tension, which we talk about often when it's just another name for Operation Gladio. The strategy of tension is, as I have said often, after World War II, they created all of these fictitious fake countries like Pakistan, and the borders around Iraq and Iran by getting rid of Kurdistan. And every single one of those created tension in those specific areas, which in hindsight is where all of the warfare happened. Whether it was the fake parallel in Korea, the fake parallel in Vietnam, all of those things were done to perpetuate this strategy of tension. So they always have a reason to go to war when they need to weapons traffic, human traffic, and drug traffic. And that's so important to understand in this lesson that we're learning about Operation Gladio. Okay. I could also argue that the whole reason that we went to World War II was to set up this entire global apparatus. Because if you go back and you kind of sit back and you're doing these, like, I know it's sick, but my brain wanders about this stuff when I'm studying it. I distinctly get the impression, so most people may or may not know that World War I resulted in the creation of the Bank of International Settlements and the League of Nations, right? Those are our foot in the doors. The Bank of International Settlement was a way to allow, during World War II, the stealing of all of these countries' gold. And I will tell you what I mean by that. And it also set up the League of Nations as a coordinating body to be able to boss everybody around. Okay, in general, that's what it was. Supposedly, we were going to do these elections and have these neutral people and blah, blah, blah. It was just a big organization like one world government to get your foot in the door. We're going to call it the League of Nations. And of course, it started the process to create Israel, which you can't disassociate with all of this strategy of tension, because that's all that's been, is a strategy of tension. So we create the Bank of International Settlements. Everybody had to deposit gold. We don't initially join, the US doesn't, everybody else does. And let's just say, I don't remember the number, but everybody had to contribute this gold. And let's just say it was $20 billion in gold. As soon as the Bank of International Settlements, and the justification for setting it up was, we have to have a mechanism because Germany owes all of us allies money, and we have to be able to get paid back. Well, you know what? World War II wasn't the first war that ended up with reparations. There was reparations paid during the Spanish-American War. We didn't need a Bank of International Settlements. We did it in a trust. There were these trusts that were set up, and you made deposits into that, and then they were distributed out, almost like a bank, if you will. So within weeks of setting up the Bank of International Settlement and the accumulation of all of this gold, the reparations for everybody was canceled. So we just set up the first IMF/World Bank called the Bank of International Settlements. And most importantly, it's called the Central Bank of Central Banks. And it's like the Vatican. It's sovereign. You can't ever investigate their books. They money launder all the time, and you can't ever check it out. Just like the Vatican money laundered for Operation Gladio, and you can't check it out. It is a get out of jail free process that now has all of this gold on. And so what Hitler then did, and in some respects, this happened with Japan in kind of a different way with Golden Lily, is Hitler, every time he would invade a country, okay, I'm here, transfer their gold to German's account. Okay, I'm here, transfer their gold to German's account. So at the end of World War II, in the Black Eagle account of the Bank of International Settlements, which was more times than not, the chief banker was an American, we had access to all of those countries' gold. And nobody knew how much it was. How beautiful is that? And then mysteriously, this thing called the Black Eagle Fund comes around, and the CIA gets born, and the National Security agency gets born. And now we're going out and doing all this covert operation. And we just so happen to have this big backlog of gold sitting over here in the Black Eagle Fund that we now have access to, and nobody can ever know whether we do or don't.
It's such next level corruption. When I was researching the bank for international settlements while you're talking about it on their homepage, and like I said, all the stuff you guys seeing popping up on the screen while the Colonel's talking, all those links are down in the description below under show links. But on their homepage, Colonel, this has come to pass. It says April 23rd, 2024. It says Harari speaks at the Innovation Summit for the Bank for International Settlements. And for those that are like, well, who's Harari? Let me bring this gentleman up on the screen real quick. There's only like 14 seconds, but this is Yuval Noah Harari. This guy,
bad guy.
This dude is bad. And he's the advisor for Klaus Schwab, the leader of the World Economic Forum. So this is the dude telling the dude that wants, to help facilitate this international crime syndicate. And so
That's
just
the dude that wants you to eat bugs.
This who eats the bugs and owns nothing. And like these people are crazy. So here's 14 seconds. Just take a listen to this, and you guys just leave in the comments. Tell me what you think.
If bad comes to worse, then when the flood comes, the scientists will build a Noah's Ark for the elite, leaving the rest to drown, the rest of the people and the rest of the ecosystem.
Like, I ain't crazy. This dude just said out loud that we got what we need to save us, and you guys are just shit out of luck.
Well, Alpha, they wrote it and engraved it in stone in the guide stones. They said that they were only going to keep around about 500,000 people, and the other, whatever we're up to now, 7.5 billion, they got to die. They're not secret about any of this. So,
and it just goes that these are the people. I'm just trying to show people how all these people are connected.
Yes.
Like what you're talking about. So like, if you were kind of on the edge, well, is Operation Gladio, you haven't watched the other 11 parts yet. Like, this is a dude tied to the Bank of International Settlements that you just heard on a public video. Link will be down in the description, saying we're going to live, the elites are going to live, and y'all are going to die. Like, these are the people.
And Gladio, while we study it from a historical perspective, is alive and well today, as you just saw. And the only thing that is going to save us is to be able to recognize it as it's happening. And I will tell you unequivocally, that is exactly what's going on all of these college campuses. It's not organic. It is Operation Gladio. This is exactly what they did in Romania. They did it in Yugoslavia. They did it in South America. They've done it all over. They pay for these agitators to create this. As you saw in the one video, I believe it was Indiana University, unfortunately, my alma mater, that they had rifle nests, sniper nests on top of the buildings. And there will be somebody shot if they want to escalate it. And that will spark the next thing, just like we just read that happened in Chicago. That's how they instigate Operation Gladio activity so that you are afraid again. And then there will be some legislation. What are they actually trying to legislate right now? Oh, that you can't criticize anybody from Israel. You can't say anything about it. Well, how does that free speech? It's not. It's a long continuum of them stealing our rights. And they use these instances to do it. It's all orchestrated. None of it's organic. None of it.
Operation Gladio glasses. Can we bring that up?
Yes.
I'm getting excited. All right. You want to explain to everybody the story, and then I'll bring this up.
I I participate in a Zoom call last Friday, and someone on the Zoom call said, "Hey, I was just in a Zoom last night, and this lady shows up having watched some of your video with literal GLADIO glasses." And I'm like, "Oh my God, I got to get a picture." That's her. And I do have her permission to show the picture. I posted it on X. She literally put her GLADIO glasses on to talk. Now show the other picture. She made more of them.
This is awesome.
So I'm stealing that picture, and it's going to be my new X banner of all of those GLADIO glasses. Oh my gosh. So we are definitely reaching people in all corners of the world. I had a guy that reached out from me to me to share some information with me that I'm looking into, and helping me with one of those brain charts from Spain. They lived real GLADIO operations there when they blew up their 3 of their trains and killed hundreds of people. So we definitely are making a splash. Just let y'all know, you're not wasting your time.
So one more time, Mrs. GLADIO glasses. If you just want to make Alpha a pair that's got like some red, white, and blue to them, I'm just saying, you know, I'll sport them. I will.
Yeah, I told Alpha I'm going to have to get me a 3D printer, because I'm going to find some of those. I'm going to hot glue my sunglasses, and I'm going to wear them during my book reviews. All right. So back to the book. J. Edgar Hoover, who often was written off as a weirdo, he did have a common enemy, and that's Frank Wisner, W-I-S-N-E-R. Frank Wisner is an oftentimes overlooked CIA asset. He started out in the Office of Policy Coordination, which was originally housed in the State Department. Because remember, what we learned is we learned that Operation GLADIO activities did not start after World War II. We've been cooing countries for 100 years before that. We did it via the State Department, and oftentimes using what was then, just prior to World War II, called the Office of Policy Coordination. So what they did once they stood up the CIA is they moved both the office and Frank over to the CIA. And it says, Wisner cut his wartime espionage teeth unsuccessfully trying to save Romania from communism, enjoying relaxing interludes with, basically he was having an affair with the crown princess of Romania. And that kind of ticked him off, that it was lost to the Soviet Union. So that kind of put a burr under his saddle in order to kind of step up his game. And he definitely stepped up his game. Wisner was overlord of the CIA's Office of Policy Coordination, and that was nicknamed the Dirty Tricks Brigade. So from 1948 until the late 50s, he was the rollout of the stay behind units. Because remember, the guy who originally orchestrated the deal with General Galen to create them was Allen Dulles. Well, now Allen Dulles is in charge of all of the CIA. So Wisner becomes his boy on the streets to go set these up everywhere. And he did so with a vengeance. And let's see, it was basically dubbed America's fifth column to undermine the potential communist subversion in Europe, and to create unorthodox warfare and black operations. By mid-1953, Wisner had directed a covert action wing of several thousand clones of himself and consumed 3/4 of the CIA's budget every year. And that was only the overt part of it. They actually had access to the Marshall Fund that was created after World War II. Again, another convenient outcome of the war was making all of this money available to do clandestine operations for reconstruction. But a lot of it was used to establish Operation GLADIO stay behind units. He had no restrictions on how to do it, and he had no restrictions on how much money he spent. He basically he took money from the Marshall Plan and created the Hollywood cartoon production of George Orwell's Animal Farm.
Oh.
And I don't know if y'all know what the Animal Farm is about, but in a nutshell, it's the animals taking over the people. And once the animals are on the farm that have taken over the people, of the group of animals, there's one specific brand or type of animal, the pigs, that dupe the rest of the animals into becoming basically the people. And what's most important about that is the mantra of the CIA. They have taken over the republic and basically kicked out all of the people that were the real patriots inside of the government, and they've taken it over. So now the animals are in control of our government. And within the animals that are in control, the CIA are the pigs. They are the ones running the entire rest of the government through blackmail and GLADIO inspired operations. It is literally depicting what we're living through right now. And he had the audacity to make a cartoon version of it with our money. Is that crazy?
Evil shows itself. It's part of the, narcissistic, egotistical traits of what comes behind evil. I mean, they do it to us on everything, movies, cartoons, everything.
Yeah. So Wisner also created Operation Mockingbird, which we've talked about repeatedly, which is basically getting, and so everybody knows that a mockingbird basically mocks other birds. They basically just say what, and that's literally what Mockingbird Media is they repeat the 4 a.m. CIA talking points to all of us. And also, he proudly called Operation Mockingbird his mighty Wurlitzer, like a piano, and he could play the ivories. That's literally what he referred to it as. So all he had to do was program the Wurlitzer piano, and it just spit back out everything that he wanted it to say. He's the maestro of the Wurlitzer. So he also, interestingly enough, was an initiate of Virginia State University's ultra-secret pseudo-Masonic lodge known as the Seven Society. The membership was revealed only after his death, and then only because they have a ritual when someone dies of placing a bunch of magnolias on top of the grave. The secret societies are not only endemic in the culture of American universities, but are incestuous recruiting quarters for the CIA. Because, of course, it talks about everything about it. A lot of these people are, a lot of these people are, what's the word? Malta, Knights of Malta. So again, another secret society. If you go through the CIA in its original form, almost every single director and above was a Knights of Malta, as was all of the GLADIO hierarchy in Italy that was revealed during the exposure there, to include, because the Knights of Malta is supposedly a Christian organization, or a Catholic organization. Gelli, Gelli, was inducted into the Knights of Malta, whatever it is. And he was an atheist. He wasn't even Catholic. So obviously, it's much more than what we've been led to believe that it is. Plus, understand that these types of organizations allow for people to meet under the guise of a meeting for that, as opposed to Operation Gladio. And that's what we found with the World Anti-Communist League that was created in where? Taiwan. And they use that organization to have meetings all over the world under the guise of anti-communist, when in actuality, it really was a Gladio recruiting, training, coordination entity. So Wisner finally got his chance to test run his covert warfare skills, and his first target was the Iranian president, Mohammad Mossadegh. He may have been the prime minister. But basically, just a real short recap of that is Mossadegh gets elected, and they have, just like the Congo, Iran's big resource, of course, is oil. And the British Petroleum had it locked up. It was Anglo-American, whatever it was called at the time, but it's BP now, had the contract. And they were giving Iran 14% of the profits, and they kept 86. And when Mossadegh got elected, he kicked them out. He says, you're not doing that anymore. I'll give you a deal 50-50. If you want to do what you're doing and keep doing it, then you give me 50% of the profit so I can implement. He was a very secular. He was not, although he was Muslim, he was not going to run Iran as a Islamic dictatorship. He educated women. He overhauled their health system. He was doing everything that anybody in our government would say is what they actually want to have done. And the British tried to coup him. Mossadegh uncovered the coup and closed the British embassy and kicked everybody out. He said, just get out. You're not allowed back in here. So MI6 calls us and says, hey, we need you to do this because we're not allowed back in. Kermit Roosevelt, who is Teddy Roosevelt's grandchild, CIA asset, goes into Iran and basically orchestrates a coup of the prime minister / president. He's perpetually jailed after that under house arrest and never is allowed to function again in life. At least he wasn't murdered, because most of them are. And we basically handed back the oil company with the installation of the Shah to British Petroleum. And because they now had to pay us plus the Shah, who wanted a bigger cut, they ended up with how much? Only 50%. And they destabilized Iran till today. Had that man been allowed to lead Iran for the next 8 years and create a stable foundation for that country, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in today. But thanks to the CIA, we are where we are today, times about 15.
Well, and I know it's 50%, but when you look at the way they operate and the way they set things up, they probably still got more than their share through other things that they did anyways. But when you look at, if Iran, we wouldn't be dealing with probably the IRGC the way we are.
We wouldn't.
We wouldn't have had, the Iraq war with Saddam. It just...
None of it. Because, of course, we installed Saddam Hussein, too. So I just want people to understand we are where we are because of the CIA. I can't say that enough. All right.
And I'll bring this up real quick too, just for those that are wondering, because I found this when it's on the National Security Archive, and it says CIA confirms role in 1953 Iran coup, and it brings up the Mossadegh and some stuff here, and I'll link that article down there just so people know, like You know, this isn't speculation, you guys. Like,
No,
this is
they
legit.
always admit what they did. So in 1956, Wisner's working on the Hungarian rising on 23 October, simmering discontent with the current government turns into riots, insurrection, and basically they're orchestrating what they hope, the CIA is orchestrating what they hope to be the first coup of a Soviet kind of satellite. And the revolutionary leader says that Hungary had unilaterally abandoned the Warsaw Pact. So tanks rolled into Budapest. He was arrested and quickly executed. So the coup that they tried there was thwarted, and Wisner goes into a manic depressive state. And basically, many people say that he never recovered from that defeat, because by that time he had orchestrated several successful coups. And it says all of their facets have not yet been exposed of that particular coup. But what we do know about it, it definitely was one of Wisner's projects. And it says it points to Hungary as a sort of proving ground for the forthcoming, what we now refer to as color revolutions, although I don't use that term. But it definitely was one of the prototypes for it. And nearly all with the backing of the CIA technicians and advisors, not to mention special forces, which oftentimes play a role in this. Wisner gave every impression of being crushed and never regained a semblance of his old confidence. He was sidelined on sick leave, and basically, I mean, they say that he was undiagnosed with a mental illness, but I would tell you anybody that does any of this shit has a diagnosed mental illness by default. And he eventually commits suicide. So that's what happens to him. And I don't know if he was suicided or if he actually committed suicide. And his whole depression is something to get rid of him. Maybe he had remorse and they had to kill him. I don't know. That's all speculation. He's just dead, as the story goes. So also understand that while I focus primarily on the CIA, what I am actually discussing includes the German BND, the UK MI6, Israel Mossad, Korea's KCIA. They're all involved in all of this. So as a note, the author mentions Seymour Hersh revealed that U.S. Special Forces had been in Iran since 2005 on reconnaissance missions, while a restive ethnic minority called the Balak. This is in relation to the Mossadegh, just to let you know that it's not something that's just strictly happened in the 1950s. And this organization is BALUCH. They are blamed for numerous attacks on the military and civilian targets in 2005. Many sources, not just Hersh, but even like ABC, claim that the Balak armed wing, which are referred to by us as soldiers of God, is a front for American, British, and Pakistani secret services, i.e. Operation GLADIO. A bomb attack on Islamic Revolutionary Guard commanders in 2009, attributed to the soldiers of God, killed 5 senior officers and left many seriously wounded. A guy by the Abdul Malik Riggi, the leader, was hanged by the Iranians in 2010 for basically working with Western forces to orchestrate that massacre. And in February 2011, Wisner's son, also named Frank, also CIA, was dispatched as Obama's personal envoy to Egypt, as Webster Tarkley and others suspected, with the task of leveraging longtime strongman Mubarak from power in the service of a wider U.S. interest to encircle Iran. So again, this is Operation Gladio tentacles that reach into our everyday life today on a continuum from, just after World War II. We've repeatedly destabilized Iran. And we got what we got.
I'm going to go back just a second because it was flowing good and I didn't want to interrupt the flow because I was loving it. And this link's down in the description with regards to Frank Wisner. But let me bring this map up on the screen just so you guys can see what I'm talking about. And I'll just read the short caption at the bottom. And forgive me, some of these words are going to be hard to say. This map shows the disposition of bands of ruffians paid to demonstrate by coup organizers early on August 19th, 1953. The bands gathered in the bazaar and other sections of southern Tehran, then moved northern through the capital. Thug leaders' names appear at the left, along with the estimated size of their groups and their targets, courtesy of Ali Ranima, author of The Forthcoming Thugs, Turncoats, Soldiers, Spooks, Anatomy of Overthrowing Mosaddegh in 4 days. But the reason I show it is because of a comment you said earlier today, like with the protests at the universities.
Yes.
With J6, with Gretchen Whitmire. If you look at this map, just place it over a university. Just place it over the Capitol. It's the same thing.
Correct.
That it shows. I mean, it's just, I really hope people are seeing all these past events through their Gladio glasses. Like, I hope people are just like, damn, like, I get it. Like, I really hope.
Well, and that's why I think Alpha, people enjoy watching our interface, because you have the cop mentality. I have a military mentality, and we look at this, and plus obviously you have the military mentality as well. But we look at this as almost like you and I would look at it, standing around a command post and orchestrating or trying to develop a plan to countermand what we're seeing going on. And when you take the overlays of, and that's exactly what happens in real war. You go back and you pull off the shelf everything that your enemy has done, and you look at what is currently going on and say, okay, well, they operated in this manner when they were presented with something very similar to that. They operated in this manner when they were presented with something over here. So you can do predictive programming as far as, or predictive outcomes. What's your most likely outcome if you do X, Y, or Z? And that's what I hope people are getting out of this. When you set up unrest on college campuses, why has that been done in the past? Go back and look at every time this happens on a wide scale effort. They stole the election in 2020. They orchestrated wide scale campus disruption. There's always an end to whatever mechanism they're using. And that's why I want people to understand, when you start seeing signs of strategy of tension, you know that there's a bigger goal. And when people start lying to you on television or on the internet, don't be afraid to confront them with the truth. And that's why I feel like we're here, is to give people the courage, give them the truth, and then give them the courage to confront them.
I'm on board with you.
So one other thing, just to mention, this did not happen in just a vacuum. There was early on, like, you know, during World War I, there was a U.S. Army counterintelligence corps that was set up. And oftentimes when you're reading Operation Gladio as it in the aftermath of World War II, there was a lot of consternation between OSS and the CIC, the Counterintelligence Corps. And there's an ongoing rivalry, if you will, that it kind of ebbs and flows. But also the Army counter intel basically unfolds into, or is enveloped into, DIA. And that comes back to what you started, what you and I were talking about beforehand. In DIA, although DIA is not completely clean on everything, DIA has always been a nemesis to CIA, always, because they have access to equally important information, and they're not as what's the word that I'm trying to think of? They're not as easily bought and paid for, if you will, within, not that they can't be, I'm not saying that, but they have a protective cocoon around them, depending on who's in charge. So just as we saw out, and I'm going to bring this back home here, just as we saw play out in the General Flynn fiasco, General Flynn sat at a table in front of a congressional hearing as the chief of DIA. And there was the CIA guy there, there was the NSA guy there, there was the NSC, the National Security Council. All of these different intel chiefs are along this panel. You have to, when you give congressional testimony, you have to submit your testimony prior to, and generally not just to Congress, but to your boss when you're in the military. General Flynn was told to change his testimony, and his testimony was an intelligence assessment about what was going on in 2014. Well, General Flynn has been quite a long time in the theater, and he was probably much better prepared to give an assessment than most of the people on that panel, and for it to be more accurate. And so he told them all that he was not going to change his testimony, and he did not. He gave his original testimony as people on his staff has. His deputy was a civilian. He actually has said on record that his testimony was not changed in any way. That's what got him fired. And that's important to understand, that the DIA is the counterweight, if you will, to the CIA on most issues. Again, they're not completely clean. They have done things in the past, because one of the other immediate things General Flynn did when he took over the DIA, as per his movie illustrates, is he started asking questions about where all the money was going. Well, the money that DIA has, because they don't have the same access to front companies and things like that that the CIA has. So most of their money for operations is through appropriations. And if you follow the money, you're going to find the skeletons. And he tells you unequivocally, he knows where the bodies are buried. And so it was, again, those types of actions. And then he compounded it by refusing to change his testimony. And in 2014, as a result of all of that, he was fired. So I say this only so everybody understands there are good people inside of this machine. They do have information that when the right people are in the right place, it's all going to become very relevant. And that's why General Flynn is one of the biggest threats to this international syndicate, because as a registered Democrat, people inside that system knows that he was embraced by all of them. And he knows way more than what any of us knows.
Well, I want to bring something up as well when it comes to the DIA. One, for those that don't know, uh, and correct me if I'm wrong here too, Colonel, but the DIA was established under Kennedy, correct?
In 1961.
So there's that. The next thing is when you go to the DIA's website, you guys know on Thursdays and now some Friday evenings, I do my Badlands Media shows. And on the DIA website, a couple of my counterparts during the show, along with the audience, came up with this term known as Badlandia.
Mhm.
And when you go to their website, now they got a comic book called Badlandia. I'm just going to say, I'll put the link in the description. Coincidence? If you
Yeah.
believe in it.
Exactly. So I said all of that to say this. In 2004, the neoconservative, longtime CIA foe, Paul Wolfowitz, which I don't know that he's a CIA foe, but whatever. He was number 2 to Donald Rumsfeld at the Pentagon, signed off on the edict creating yet another secret purse called Counterintelligence Field Agency. By 2008, it had amassed some 2,000 agents with powers to spy on American citizens on U.S. soil, a direct affront to by the military to the FBI. Obviously, this is quite possibly unconstitutional. I would argue that it is. And it also says intelligence community number more than 800,000 with no clear oversight or boundaries. In the same camp, the widely despised TSA, which I know you love, basically subject people to the same types of things in airports. And all of these things appear to be morphing into a paramilitary arm of the Department of Homeland Security, which obviously has what you see coming up through all of this is basically what was exposed in Italy. These are all paramilitary organizations. They're all equipped with guns. They all have the ability to kill us. And they are morphing out of our federal government in a violation of all of our civil rights. And that's kind of basically where we started with the whole Chicago network of them back then. And they have only grown exponentially now. And we've created more bureaucracies and more paramilitary capabilities inside of those bureaucracies.
Definitely not a fan of the TSA. So everybody knows.
Yes, we all know. Also, the Pentagon and the National Security Council sought justification for many of the Afghanistan, Vietnam wars under that kind of false illusion of containment. And you have all of the resistance that this international syndicate, they basically promote it as the rebel forces fighting back against the West imperialism. They say are terrorists, just like they've started calling us domestic terrorists. And I get so frustrated with this because you have to understand it's hard for us to even fathom that level of evilness that they would call patriots in other countries trying to take their country back as terrorists. But now that it's been illustrated to us up front and personal here, you have to be able to understand now what we've put other countries through, because it was done to us, and it's been done to us repeatedly. If you go back through history,
And just a little sauce, when it comes to the TSA. For those that don't know, TSA came after 9/11. for those that don't know or are young and don't, weren't around for that time. And it was in November. I don't know the date. I'll go back. I know it's on that link, but TSA was created in November of 2001. We established the TSA in less or right around 60 days. And we're going to think like we know how the government moves. They can't create an entire agency in 2 months.
Well, but you know that law was drafted before 9/11, right?
I did not know that, but it makes sense.
It was actually written prior to 9/11. There had been discussions about it, but basically everybody said if you didn't have another Pearl Harbor, you would never get it passed.
And we had 9/11 conveniently for them.
Just saying. All right. So I want to make this point. During all of this and the secret wars that are going on both in Europe, and then, we have all the stuff that was going on in Vietnam and after, you see these as a hub of a global system that basically is operating to instill American power or imperialism, not necessarily on behalf of Americans, but on behalf of this international syndicate. In the Far East, movements of extreme tension continually arose around, not in the Far East. Moments of extreme tension, that's why I can't read my own writing, continually arose around a divided Berlin. There were 3 powerful anti-Soviet uprisings in East Germany, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia. Poland was constantly with what many may, if you're older, know it was referred to as solidarity under Lech Walesa, which was basically a labor union that was used to create basically a counter-revolution. And a Polish professor says a perspective analysis of these realms, surveying the landscape of modern nation states, he pointed to the existence of their fringe, shadowy borderlands characterized by indistinction, lawlessness, and cannot be clearly distinguished between friends and foes. There is no more fitting description of the deep state. In the summer of 2010, the Pentagon pronounced an adjustment to terminology, which subliminally indicated that stay-behind armies are alive and busy. A small printed announcement declared PSYOPs behind enemy lines would henceforth be redesignated Military Information Support Operations, or MISO. It led, as before, to Fort Bragg secret warfare base, with the emphasis on unchanged role of shaping attitudes in the public sphere. In other words, PSYOPs. But a spokesman declared, hand on heart, there was nothing sinister about it. An unmistakable reference to GLADIO. The exact meaning of behind the lines retained the same exclusive and fluid lack of definition. The victims of the secret war waged in Europe were ordinary folks stepping out on everyday business trips, shopping, waiting for trains, visiting banks, or sipping a beer. They were not trapped in crossfire in a foreign land. They were the selected targets of manic psychological terror pursued to its extremes. And that is the definition of Operation GLADIO.
100%.
So
I'm going to show. Come on, I just had it up. I can find it real quick. So, and for those that don't know, when you go to the Alpha Warrior show, look for playlists, because I know some of you are like, oh, how do I find it with all the shows out there? if you go to playlists, all the shows in order, 1 through today's show will be there. But the first Operation Gladio, this is what I was looking for, that me and Colonel aired, was on February 13th of this year. Shortly after that, when we started to hear the word Operation Gladio everywhere, this article comes out April 2nd, and I'll bring it up. New report reveals dirty secret of Army psychological operations, and I'll link this down in the description. And what you're going to find in here is stay behind units. I'm just like, timing. It's a cool article. Like I said, I'll link it down below so you guys can read it. I don't remember. I don't think it's behind a paywall, or I think you get one article on their site, so you should still be able to read it. But there's a lot of terms in there, information warfare and different things like that I think you guys will find very, very interesting.
And so we're going to take this to its conclusion over to Turkey. And I want to point out to everybody that when you look at Turkey, had the largest military budget outside of the US and all of NATO. They also had the largest Gladio operation that anyone knows of. And their name for it was called Grey Wolves. And there's some other entities that made up their entire network. It's never just one thing, but that was the primary element of their Operation Gladio network. When the attack happened in Russia just recently, it was revealed almost immediately that the perpetrators of that event, the actual trigger pullers, had trained in Turkey. And Erdogan, when Putin gave him the coordinates of where they had tracked those cell phones to identify where the training bases were. So and you'll get what I'm doing with this, Alpha, from your police training. When you actually are going to attack, in your Marine training, actually, if you're going to attack a target, you have a mock-up of it, you have pictures, you have the idea, but they always want you to do basically a recon so you can get real world eyes on target of where you're going to be operating, the terrain, and blah, blah, blah. So they got these people inside of that venue in whatever capacity it was. They come back so they've trained, they go get eyes on, they come back to Turkey and do the rest of their training based on whatever it is, the new information that they found with eyes on target. And then they deploy through Ukraine into Russia to do this. And you see that in the immediate aftermath of that happening and the exposure of that data from Putin, Erdogan immediately began taking out those training facilities. So I have kind of been on the fence for a long time about Erdogan and whether he's one of the good guys or bad guys. I will tell you, I have two things. That was the second one. But the first one that I came up, well, there's actually three. He kicked out the crazy weirdo guy that lives in Pennsylvania. So that was the first good thing that he did. But in the past, Turkey's leadership has been couped repeatedly by their military because their military is all Western trained. All of their general officers are trained in the United States. They go to our National War College, our Air War College. They go to what was the Schools of America, now down at Fort Benning, whatever. So they're 100% U.S. trained. A lot of them goes to get master's degrees in European cities as well. So very Westernized. And in the past, they get a phone call from the CIA and they say, okay, get that guy out. He's doing something we don't like. Where Erdogan began negotiating with Putin right away. He began talking to Assad right away. Well, what was the first thing that happened? The military got the call and said, hey, you need to get him out. Well, Erdogan was ready for them. And he basically countered their coup and arrested all of the senior leadership of the military, executed a couple, and imprisoned the rest. And so that's kind of the good news in all of this, that many of the world leaders are very much aware of what it is that has been done in the past. They don't hold the American populace accountable for it. They hold our government accountable for it, and specifically the CIA, as well as NATO. And that's the reason why Erdogan has made some very interesting comments and not gone along with a lot of what NATO has wanted to have done, because he sees it for what it really is.
You know, just looking at it from a strategy and operational planning, you know, to plan a coup is, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. Obviously, you look at Operation Gladio, but what's even more difficult than planning a coup is to do countering a coup. That is actually harder than the coup, because you have to have assets in every aspect of your government, your military, your state, everything, because you got to know you can't be having people in your operational planning that are part of the coup. So
overnight.
yeah, exactly. So I mean, this is where things get crazy. This is where you're like, secret agent that's a double mole, triple mole. I mean, the fact that this man was able to know, I'm going to get in there, they're going to do this, and we're going to counter it this way. It's reassuring to know that you can't do that without help.
Yeah.
You can't. Interesting.
And that's why I like closing with those types of things, because a lot of what we say is very heavy, and I want people to understand that there are bright spots in it.
You know, and here's the bright spot in the darkness that we see unfolding in our country and around the world, for that matter. The one thing that these entities understand, you know, whether you look at it from our independent government or like the International Crime Syndicate, well, the one thing that is more powerful than laws or laws, the one thing that's more powerful than law is the court of public opinion, because the court of public opinion is going to allow you to do things that may be outside the scope of law. And when you come from civilized nations like ours and a lot of these other ones that are out there, and to counter some of the things that may be going on, remember the counter coup, you got to have the court of public opinion on your side. And as dark as these days have been, these years, not days, but these years have been, you are seeing in real time right now the court of public opinion shifting in our favor. You just saw it in New York a few days ago when they hit up the Democratic Union guys. And you got a message to Joe Biden, my friend here. He goes, yeah, I do. Fuck Joe Biden. These are dudes that are Democrats that shift the court, you know, that public, you know, I've hit the general up on this a few times, you know. What does that exact percentage look like? You know, because I'm curious, because I'm trying to gauge, you know, a timeline here. But I think we're quickly approaching that threshold of court of public opinion that we need to see however this unfolds.
And now you know why all of the elements that were used to wake people up have been used, good or bad. There are downsides to everything. But if you require the court of public opinion to be in your favor when you do something, you are going to have to take actions that you wouldn't normally take. And that's why Trump says things like unprecedented crimes require unprecedented solutions.
There's a lot of crazy stuff going on, Kern. You have the Speaker of the House saying I'm a wartime speaker. I mean, just there's a lot. There's a lot going on. That's why and you know, real quick, I'm gonna bring this up on the screen because I like people to know geographically what we're talking about. So for those that are like Turkey, I kind of know. This gives you an idea when you look at the Europe's map of where Turkey is in relation to Russia and Africa and in the Middle East. So I want to.
It's critical. That's where it is. It is in the heart of everything.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm fascinated by this. I do want to bring on the screen, and we'll fly through this really quick. Make sure I got the right one. I think this is it. Yes. Okay. Our comments. So we did miss last week's show because we did a live show. So I'll fly through real quick the one that we missed, and then we'll go into our actual last week's part 11 show and go through the comments. So real quick from show number 10, yeah, getting my math right here. First question is, what is Sean Taylor doing now? Any updates? He was a gentleman. I briefly mentioned to you, Colonel, that he did the same thing in law enforcement I did, but he did it from the narcotic side when I did it on the gang side. And, you know, a lot of our work ended up intersecting quite a few times, and we connected, and we're doing this real-time investigation, but they ended up shooting at his house and then damaging my cable box on the same day in the weekend. Sean is fine, you guys. I'm happy to say that he was hired on in a very high rank in law enforcement out in Tennessee. And obviously being in that position, you gotta have to be careful with what you do on podcasting and things like that. And, you know, we would love to continue. Just understand that his role right now is important because he has an immediate local effect on his community. And I'm sure we could probably bring him on just for a general conversation. So that was an important one. So I wanted to cover that one. This one, and that came from MSN Muir. And this one comes from Emerson Big Uns. Colonel Towner, your research is absolutely invaluable. Dissemination to the people is critical for understanding the world we live in. God bless and keep you safe. Which goes into Tootie's comment. Once you are awake, you can't go back to sleep. I like how you said, look at things in the past with GLADIO glasses on. Boom, boom, boom. And then this one comes from S Snook 2. As much as I'm enjoying this, parentheses, it's hard to find joy in this enlightenment. I understand. I very much worry about your safety. They're already after Alpha. I can't imagine how much they want to silence the Colonel. Be safe. And Colonel, I'll let you address that one.
I'm not worried. I'm a Christian. God's got my back. My husband, I can't tell you what a godsend my husband is. He obviously understands everything that's going on, but he has such the most attractive thing about my husband is his sense of humor. And he says, anytime someone says something like this, the first thing he pops up and says is, yeah, I stopped walking between her and windows a long time ago. But
I was gonna tell him, if you can tell him jokingly, Alpha and the audience said, do you mind turning on the Colonel's car for her?
Oh, well, interestingly enough, we do have security cameras everywhere, literally everywhere. And you know, I shot marksman every time I went to the range. And I got to tell you this, Alpha, I don't even think I told you this. I should have said this in my sit rep with 2 Marines sitting there. My favorite trip ever, because, you know, obviously, if you're in a deployment position, you have to go to the range once a year, if not more often, to stay qualified on a 9mm, which is what officers carry. And so when I was at U.S. Central Command, the first year I was there, they'd take whole buses of us out because we were a deployable headquarters. So we all had to qualify. So we monopolized the MacDill Air Force Base range for weeks on end as we all cycled through every year. And so I got paired up. There's like dual range going down. And I got paired up with a Marine major. And I was also a major. And he was kind of bantering, you know, about being stuck with an Air Force female. And so I outshot him. And to his credit, because I don't think I ever went to the whole time I was an officer that I didn't qualify as marksman, you know, on the range. And because I practice a lot. On the way back, and the range is on the back side of the base. So it's a long around the flight line all the way to the front side of the base where CENTCOM headquarters was. Long. And so we kind of all got in based on where we were at on the range. And so he's again sitting next to me across the aisle. He gets up and the entire bus and says, you know, I don't think I've had a suckier day in my entire Marine career. He says, I not only got outshot by an Air Force person, she was a female too. And he said that in front of the entire bus. And so I just stood up and gave him a high five.
You're just like, damn, Skippy.
Yeah. But you know, to his credit, he and that was kind of a nice affirmation for me. But I don't have any fear about speaking the truth. And I know that based on the correlations of the information that I have uncovered and how it relates to my career specifically in the military and the overlapping of everything, I know I'm on a mission and I'm not going to stop.
100%. And the one thing in information warfare too that, you know, the deep state international crime syndicate's also afraid of is when you take someone out, you bring more eyes to them and more curiosity, and you turn, you know, small fire into a forest fire. That the way they want to do this is, you know, they want to label things, they want to censor things. That's kind of what works for them, and that's where you, the audience, come in handy, because when you go and share these links or share clips and all that, that is what defeats the censorship and everything that they do by trying to control and manipulate big tech. And of course, I knew Colonel would be a good shot. Aim small, miss small. So now we come into last week's show. A few of them on here. This one comes from Halo Moon. Awesome show. So much information, so much work to put all of this together for us. Thank you. 100%. A lot of work goes into it. Gail Sieb, if Eisenhower was talking about GLADIO, then John F. Kennedy in his famous speech where he says monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that uses guerrillas by night rather than armies by day, end of quote, probably means he was warning us about GLADIO, global GLADIO.
Absolutely.
I knew you would like that one. I like that one too. Let's see. Next one comes from DJ Mal 85. There's no way I would jump on a grenade for an officer. Oh, I remember this one. Or anyone other than my wife and children. So, quick little story here, if you allow me. Before I joined the Marine Corps, and you always hear these stories of these, combat vets that would jump on the grenade for their friend. And I remember, signing up and going into boot camp and wondering, like, of course, I'm brave, I'm courageous, I'll do whatever I need to do for my country. But you always wonder, if a grenade was thrown in the foxhole, like, would I do that? I have 2 baby girls at home at the time. Like, if you're honest with yourself, you think about these things. Well, then I had an experience that answered this for me, and it really stunned me. It really did stun me. And in the Marine Corps, well, in all the branches, you do grenade training. But before you ever use a live grenade, which is very disappointing, by the way, you go through like just crazy extensive dry runs with practice grenades. It have like a popping fuse inside them. They can still hurt you, but the chances are very unlikely they're going to kill you. And in one of these particular scenarios, we're on an uphill thing where you had to pop up, toss the grenade, and then you pop down and you're with your partner, and the drill instructors are all watching this. And so, my partner at the time, called Nanners, he pops up, he does it, everything's solid, good to go. Now it's Alpha's turn. So he's down because while your partner's doing it, you're holding your vest and you're face down with your Kevlar on. So he's unaware of anything that's going on. So I pop up, and when I pop up to throw it, the fuse pops out of the grenade and lands right next to his face, his ear, on the ground. Which, like I said, not going to kill him, but it would have hurt him pretty bad. I see that, and I roll him over me to put me between that fuse that was about to, pop off and explode and him. But there was no thought process to this. It was instantaneous. And now the drill instructors loved it. My buddy loved it. In boot camp, they don't high five you. Like, I was getting some love from what they saw. But for me internally, Colonel, I was like, oh my God. If
So
you would just do it.
So let me just go back to the beginning of your story when you say that, like, we all know, we don't do grenade training in the Air Force, so you're on your own. Almost went, what? Wait, what? We don't do that.
It just is. I guess maybe I was okay. That's why you don't assume, everybody. But it was just, to go into your question, DJ Mal, is, you don't know that. Your love for the truth, you're seeking for the truth of why you're here. You would probably do what I did, and that natural instinct to protect others would just it would just take priority over any emotional priority you think you have. And it was one of those moments that, for as a young Marine at the time, still a recruit, was very eye-opening to, like, wow, so I wanted to share that. So then we move on. I think there's one or two left. TBH 14 Alpha. Haven't watched this one on number 10. Putting on my GLADIO glasses. Was Maui a GLADIO operation? All the kids just disappeared, right? And I'll give that one to you, Colonel, because I don't know.
So I don't see. We looked into Maui. Do I think that there is the possibility that it was? Absolutely. Do I think that when you lump those two things together, I have to caveat that the child aspect of it. The story of all of the kids disappearing is not based on real information. It was based on the fact that yesterday, prior to this massive fire, we had, and I'm just making up a number, 2,000 kids in an elementary school. The week after, when school resumed, we had 500 kids in an elementary school. Those people no longer have a house. They were moved to other islands. Some came back to the States to visit relatives because they lost everything in the fire. So we have no idea if any children was taken. We have no idea if any children were lost. We don't know what that number is. And so just like with the whole babies being beheaded on October 7th, the original person that put that story out retracted the story after it had been out for a couple of days, and then everybody was off to the races. That's called propaganda. I believe that everything about those fires was not natural. The fact that the water was turned off, I mean, you could just go down a list, and many people have seen people make those comments. There was nothing natural about Maui, and we all know that it was a 15-minute city. It's slated to do that. From an insurance perspective, you buy as much property as you can in an area that you want to completely change. Then you burn it down because it saves you demo fees, and it saves you all of the time constraints of having to dispose of what could be hazardous waste and all of the expenses associated with that. You just burn it. And then you collect insurance, which then pays for your new city that you're going to do, your 15-minute city. This has been done repeatedly throughout history. It's not anything new. You just burn it down. And then whatever property owners that would not sell their property to you, they are now in dire straits because they may or may not have had their own insurance. They're much more vulnerable. You can get much more property by doing this. There's a whole methodology behind these fires.
I agree completely with you on that, and I appreciate that analysis of it. I do have a friend that lives out there, and he did say there's definitely some funny business that unfolded, but he said that the numbers with people missing and all were grossly exaggerated up front. It's just people just couldn't find each other is what it came down. Everything you just said. And so I believe there's two left. Yes, there's one. So this one comes from AZ Michelle. All right. So here we go. Alpha's going to be professional. Pretending every Wednesday to be live with the Colonel is so disrespectful of your audience. Episode 11 is the first time and the Colonel say you and the Colonel say you are live. So 10 episodes prior were pre-recorded and comments edited in. So everybody's entitled to their opinion. And I will take constructive criticism. This is what I'll say. If you've been following my show the last 2.5 years, approaching 3 years, you'll know that 75% of my shows have always been live. I like it. I have fun. It's like why me and the Colonel had so much fun on 11. However, certain things that have unfolded have made it to where I have to do these pre-recorded shows. But to say that funny business and editing in comments and, you know, the prior comment where you put what the F is going on. Listen, if you don't like the show, there's plenty of other shows with great content and great content creators that you can go and find if you think that I'm trying to bamboozle this audience. Okay, me doing this show, trust me, does not make my plight in the fight against the government easier. It makes it harder. They are pissed that I'm doing this. If you remember, the last thing the FBI told me before leaving my home was, stop talking about the government and your life will go back to normal. Take the off ramp. You're a good guy. This is definitely not me doing that. I don't edit comments into the show. I'm present for every show when I air it in the comment section, interacting with you guys, the audience. The Colonel's had the chance to show up and answer real-time questions. So there's no WTF going on. These are just the circumstances. However, that being said, AZ Michelle, you set me up for a great commercial. You guys, I would love to do live shows 5 days a week. So if you can help facilitate that by signing up for my locals and, you know, paying $5 a month, enough of you guys do that, and I can do something like that. But the way status quo is right now, this is the kind of way we rock it. And I'll give it to you, Colonel, if you want to add.
Well, first of all, let me just say this. We made it unequivocally clear that by saying that last week that we were live for the first time, there was never any promotion that any of the other shows were live. What Michelle obviously misses in all of this is, as a podcaster, you have two options. You can pre-record or you can do live. And when you pre-record, you schedule a particular time for it to air. And having been a new podcaster myself, I've just figured all of this out. When you schedule something to air, you can just say midnight and not be there. Or you can go to the trouble of saying, I'm going to do it on Wednesday night at 9 o'clock. And I'm going to not only spend the 2 hours or 3 hours, because we talked before, on Sunday with the Colonel taping the show, but I'm also going to spend 2 hours every Wednesday, which doubles your time to air it. And I'm going to be in the comments so that all of the fans of the show can interact with me, the host, Alpha. You could just as easily only pre-record, throw it out there at 9 o'clock, and still have a wonderful time with all of your fans and not you being in the comments talking back and forth. But you don't do that. You go the extra mile. You send me a note saying, hey, we're about to go live. If you have time, come on in. And you show up every time. That's double the work, Michelle.
Thank you, because I didn't even think about it that way. Freaking rocked it, Colonel. And then the last one, here we go, from Lulu F2. I am a fan of theories, but this is fact. And thank you, Alpha, for your interest and curiosity, and to Colonel Towner for your research, and shout out to the ladies who help you. This information is blowing my mind every time I listen. In all honesty, I'm mad as hell with the lies and deception, yet very encouraged by men and women like you whose conviction challenged me to not be quiet. Thank you for your faith, and I am grateful to God that he directed me to you and that I might learn and understand. And I thought, what a phenomenal comment to end on. If you have any final words, Colonel.
So I do obviously like to give a shout out to Liza and Bridget, my two researchers that we talk almost daily. We are working on a big expose right now that has taken an extremely significant amount of time to put together because it's huge. And I do, for the first time, we just surpassed whatever the gateway is to, we do have a Rumble channel, as most of people know, because a lot of your fans has come over and joined our Rumble channel, and a lot of them have actually contributed. I will let you know that that money is shared with Liza and Bridget. We've made not even $100. So, but for them specifically, it is important because they don't have, number one, the resources I have. They also don't have the library that I have. A lot of my research is made easier time-wise because of the library I already have. And so I can't thank them enough for them dedicating the hours that they have in addition to their work, doing this for all of you. I'm eternally grateful for both of them.
Oh, and we are eternally grateful for you and the team. You guys, you want more of the Colonel? You're like, what are you talking about? Her Rumble channel. Links down in the description. Follow the Colonel on X. Follow the Colonel on Rumble. Support these people that are doing the research to put this information in front of us so we can look at it, dissect it, group think, synergy, all the good stuff. You guys, we went commercial free through this entire show. So do me a solid. Stick around and support the people that support this channel. Thank you.
I'm excited to announce we're having a huge MyPillow spring sale. And here's a few examples. Buy one of our MyPillow 2.0s, you get another MyPillow 2.0 absolutely free. Made with cooling technology, the best pillow ever just got even better. And this just in, 9 brand new colors and styles of our Percale bed sheets. They're made with the finest long staple cotton, and now you can save 50% or more. That's as low as $24.98. And for the first time this year, I'm bringing you our My Slippers and Sandals for as low as $25 a pair. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get your MyPillow 2.0s. Buy one, get one free. Percale sheets as low as $24.98. My Slippers and Sandals as low as $25 a pair. And for a limited time, when you order $75 or more, your entire order ships absolutely free.